The year 2020 will, more than anything else, be defined by the ongoing pandemic and how our societies have reacted to it. At the tail end of 2019, a novel virus was detected in the Wuhan district of China. It was a coronavirus, which refers to a wide variety of a particular shape of virus that includes everything from Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome to the common cold. What this one was most similar to is SARS, which was declared a local pandemic in the country of China in the early 2000s. As such, the current virus was dubbed SARS-CoV-2, which causes the disease that we know as COVID-19, or colloquially known as the coronavirus. Unlike SARS, which was mostly self-contained to China, COVID-19 made its way across the world to every continent except Antarctica, and affecting almost every nation on Earth. Even before that, we had heard scary things about the virus. It had a long incubation period, 14 days being thrown around a lot, but there were stories of even longer incubations going on, for almost a month. People speculated that the virus was airborne, and people panicked, but that mostly happened later. Let's go back to January and talk about how we got to July. This year is long, and it might be wise to go over its history in order to better predict its future, and the legacy that this year will leave in future history books. Despite being discovered at the tail end of 2019, no one outside of China had really heard of COVID-19 until January of 2020. And what we heard in January was frightening, both of the disease and what the authoritarian government of China was doing to curb the spread of it. By late January, with only around 25 deaths, China had stopped all train, bus, and air traffic. They made surgical masks mandatory. By February, we had seen footage that suggested that the government was sealing people in their apartments to prevent the spread. People were unable to leave their buildings for medical treatment to curb the spread of the disease. China even used drones to spray disinfectant. None of these stopped China from becoming the epicenter of the disease for the first leg of the year. That may be because their government was more concerned about the diplomatic look of unleashing a novel virus onto the world than any medical concerns. A man known as Dr. Li rose early concerns over the risks and dangers of the novel coronavirus. The man posted a video on the Chinese social media app WeChat and sent it to private friends and family, but it went public and it went viral. He was forced by the Chinese government to write an apology for doing this. Afterwards, he caught the coronavirus and died roughly around the start of February. Making China look even worse is that they frequently sent out equipment to the rest of the world that was either faulty or infected with the coronavirus. If you want to know why people are supportive of the United States leaving the World Health Organization, it all starts here. On January 14th, the WHO released a tweet. This one. In it, they parrot the Chinese authorities saying that person-to-person transmission of the coronavirus was unlikely, finding no clear evidence of it. This was, coincidentally, the same day that cases outside of the Wuhan district were discovered. The country as a whole had 201 laboratory-confirmed cases then. For the World Health Organization to not scrutinize the data, to them not having access to this necessary data, or to misunderstand viral spread this severely, put their credibility into question. This issue was compounded later on when it came to the issue of Taiwan.
Will the WHO consider Taiwan's membership? Hello?
I'm sorry, I can't hear. I couldn't hear your question.
Okay, yeah. Let me repeat the question.
No, that's okay. Let's move to another one then.
Right, because I'm actually curious on talking about Taiwan as well, on Taiwan's case.
We decided to give Dr. Alward another call to follow up.
And I just want to see if you can comment a bit on how Taiwan has done so far in terms of containing the virus.
Well, we've already talked about China, and when you look across all the different areas of China, they've actually all done quite a good job. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for inviting us to participate, and and good luck as you go forward with the battle in Hong Kong.
During an interview, a senior member of the World Health Organization dodged questions about Taiwan, despite their successes in their own coronavirus fight. During the interview, the WHO senior member literally called Taiwan China. Whether it was a slip of the tongue or not, it put even more worry onto the credibility of the WHO, to basically ignore Taiwan and its successes, when their methods on controlling the virus could have benefited the rest of the world. So the rest of the world, it looked like the WHO was valuing China's contributions more than actually stopping the ongoing pandemic. Not helping the fact was that this outbreak happened at possibly the worst time that it could have, before the Chinese New Year, which took place on January 25th of this year. During this time, people traveled all over the world, especially to and from China, to visit family and acquaintances from all over the world. When you combine this with the fact that the virus could be incubating for up to 14 days, it was a perfect storm for disaster. To put it bluntly, though, the rest of the world didn't help very much. When rumors of this new virus circulated around the Western world, they were often shot down as racist. Talking about the virus in some areas was seen as being prejudiced towards the Chinese. Italy went so far as to have a Hug a Chinese Day campaign on February 1st. People were encouraged to photograph themselves hugging Chinese people in an attempt to curb racism towards the people. Coincidentally or not, Italy became one of the worst countries for the virus. This was a theme that was played throughout the globe. In the United States, coronavirus measures became partisan almost immediately. Left-wing politicians such as Nancy Pelosi and Andrew Cuomo not only participated in the Chinese New Year events, which caused massive gatherings of people in huge urban centers.
And Queens is stronger than ever. It is literally an international tourism site with so many visitors coming to Queens. And it's such a joy to see the Asian American community flourishing here in Queens.
You should come to Chinatown. Precautions have been taken by our city. We know that there is a concern about tourism traveling all throughout the world, but we think it's very safe to be in Chinatown and hope that others will come.
The news media did not help either. Many of them made the claim that the flu was more deadly, and they repeatedly told people not to worry. The day after the United States issued its first travel restriction, USA Today reported that the flu was more worrying on February 1st. Get used to me saying this, but the media, at least here in the United States, has been a continual problem, and probably inadvertently caused many deaths. On January 31st, President Donald Trump issued travel restrictions, not a total travel ban as was reported. Non-citizens that were not family members of the United States citizens could not enter the country from China, and this move was criticized to hell and back. And I suppose we should talk about this and its validity. The chances that travel restrictions had done anything were slim to none for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, it happened far too late. Most of the travel had occurred before the Chinese New Year, and any spread of the disease would have happened by the time that the travel ban was implemented. The second main issue is this would have been way too easy to circumvent. All someone had to do was fly from China to a third country and then to the United States, or vice versa. It took until March for travel bans to Europe to be implemented as well. Additionally, the coronavirus was already in the country by the time this ban was implemented. The first case was identified on January 20th in Washington State, and by then, it was already too late to close the doors. Of course, as time went on, other countries closed their borders to each other, including members of the European Union, a compilation of countries that were designed for, among other reasons, to have free movement between each other. As time goes on, isolating a country has more and more practical concerns. Let's take New Zealand, for instance. In the ongoing attempt to control the pandemic, New Zealand has been seen as a pinnacle. To be fair, they've had an advantage to start with. New Zealand is an island country in the corner of the world that is not a major hub of travel. On top of that, it has a relatively low population density. Between 5 and 6 million people live in the country of New Zealand, which is less than the population of the US state of Massachusetts. However, the New Zealand population is scattered across 2 islands the size of the entire eastern United States seaboard. New Zealand locked down hard. On June 8th, they declared that they had no coronavirus left in their country. From that day, they decided to start opening things up again. On the 16th, the country had 2 new cases. 2 people had visited the country for a funeral, one of which was showing no symptoms whatsoever. A third case was soon to follow, also someone who had come in from another country. New Zealand's main attempt to control the incoming virus was to have people quarantine when entering the country for 14 days. Many people do not follow this protocol. One story tells of a man who cut through a 6-foot fence in order to go to a liquor store. People who test negatively for a disease don't believe they're sick and generally don't like to be treated like prisoners. Another man who did test positive visited a supermarket. Their health minister had even resigned after breaking his own quarantine rules. Another theme that we'll probably see throughout this entire mess. If New Zealand, an island country that managed to take care of the virus domestically, can't keep it out of its borders, what hope does virtually any other country hope to accomplish by closing its borders? But let's assume that they were able to clamp down on this and keep control and stop COVID from getting in entirely. Then what? New Zealand's economy is highly dependent on tourism. In order to keep COVID out, there is nothing else they can do but keep everything else out as well. What's their plan? To keep things closed down until the coronavirus is gone from the rest of the world? That's not feasible by any stretch of the imagination. What else could they do? Quarantine everyone who arrives in the country for 14 days? Yeah, I'm sure the tourists are gonna love that. On top of that, travel restrictions based on the disease are usually enforced with infrared thermometer guns. These can be described as inaccurate at best, because taking a temperature is one of the least reliable ways to determine if someone actually has disease, even one that has a fever as a known symptom. First of all, thermometer guns aren't really tested for accuracy out in the field. Unlike determining speed from a distance, determining temperature has way too many variables. There could easily be interference from background temperature. Beyond that, there's the issue that comes from the conception of using these as a protocol. The average temperature of the human body is 98.6 degrees, or 37 degrees Celsius. The key word, of course, is average. Normal human body temperatures can go as low as 97 degrees, or as high as 99 degrees. If someone with an abnormally low body temperature has a fever, they can register as normal. Meanwhile, someone with a naturally high body temperature can be falsely dinged as having a fever when they don't have one. On top of that, you also have an issue with this. Tylenol, or acetaminophen, is an over-the-counter medication that is used to treat aches and reduce fever. It can't cure the coronavirus, but it can mask someone having a fever. In this pandemic, the entire big picture must be thought of. Thinking of things from moment to moment has led to multiple disastrous policies, and we're gonna go through every single one of them. And where else to start but with the most evil. Evil is the word that I want to use. The most evil thing that has been done in order to curb the spread of COVID. Here's a not so fun fact for you. Did you know that 40% of COVID deaths in the United States occurred in nursing homes? That is more than 54,000 deaths. In at least 24 states, a majority of the deaths are linked directly to nursing homes. But that's not the full story here. Let's talk about public health policy, shall we? The states of New Jersey, California, and New York required nursing homes to take in COVID patients. New York even had a special rule. As long as the patients were stable, nursing homes had to take patients that were diagnosed with the coronavirus, essentially condemning everyone within to die. Connecticut and Massachusetts had certain facilities within it designated specifically for COVID patients. This chart should show you how well that worked out. 64% of COVID deaths in Massachusetts occurred in nursing homes. In Connecticut, it was 73%. Almost 3/4 of them. 3 in 4. To put things into raw numbers, 6,000 nursing home patients died in New York on the governor's orders. And we're going to be talking about him, one Mr. Andrew Cuomo, a great deal. He claimed that he was following the CDC guidelines and blamed Trump for his actions. A statement which even Politico rates as mostly false. I want to talk about how evil this man is. Let's start with the fact that he ran a survey on COVID hospitalizations. Looking at the data from 100 New York hospitals, 66% of people surveyed had gotten COVID while following his stay-at-home orders. And the second biggest percentage came from nursing homes at 18%. According to his own surveys, 84% of people had contacted COVID following his orders. He seemed surprised by this, but he didn't let this new information change his plans or policies and continue to lock down. So much for following the science and the data.
The illness is death. What is worse than death?
What if somebody commits suicide because they can't pay their bills?
Yeah, but the illnesses may be my death as opposed to your death. You said they said the cure is worse than the illness. The illness is death. How can the cure be worse than the illness if the illness is potential death?
What if the economy failing
worse than death
equals death? Because of
but
mental
it
illness,
doesn't.
the people stuck at home.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't equal death. Economic hardship, yes, very bad, not death. Emotional stress from being locked in a house, very bad, not death. Domestic violence on the increase, very bad, not death. And not death of someone else. It's not about me, it's about we. Get your head around the we concept. So it's not all about you.
This video interview from him is monstrous. Within it, Cuomo writes off every single possible side effect of the lockdowns. Poverty, domestic abuse, and so on. To every single thing he says, it's not death. If you're beaten to death by your husband, if you starve on the streets, if you become homeless and catch COVID out on the streets, it's okay. It's not death. It's fine by him. Then when suicide is brought up, he says, and I quote, yeah, but illness may be my death as opposed to your death. Watching the video in which he says this leaves me a special kind of speechless. I couldn't watch even the interview in one sitting, even though it's a fairly short video. Let me just say that the "it may be my death" line doesn't convince anyone who sees no value in the life of a soulless slimeball who only cares about himself. In my personal opinion, with this video and this interview, Andrew Cuomo declared himself the most evil man in American politics. And that is a bar to hit. And we're not even done with this guy yet. Andrew Cuomo requested thousands of ventilators. 30,000 of them. It was claimed that he had ventilators in a stockpile. He did, but he claimed that that was for the apex. He made a huge deal about how all of these would be needed. In the end, he had enough to start sending to other states. If the state of New York needed thousands of these things, why was he able to send away even hundreds? This whole ventilator race was moot anyway, because as we've learned, ventilators actually aren't the most helpful thing in the world to fighting COVID-19. Some hospitals were too quick to put people on ventilators. Unfortunately, certain features of the disease could make mechanical ventilation more harmful than helpful. In the UK, Boris Johnson was put on oxygen and not a ventilator. Moving away from ventilators might be one of the reasons that the death rates continue to fall. We've known since 2015 that mechanical ventilation leads to long-term effects, which may be the long-term effects that COVID-19 has been blamed for, and we spent the first leg of this race trying to make as many of these things as possible. Remember what I said, not thinking of the whole picture has been one of the biggest and most continual mistakes throughout this whole pandemic. Andrew Cuomo, after demanding ventilators that he would eventually send away, decided to tax out-of-state essential workers who had come in to help with the coronavirus pandemic. You want to know how the media treated this guy after all of this? They wanted him to be president. They kept teasing an Andrew Cuomo run in 2020 or even 2024. There were other politicians in the United States that have and continue to take objectionable actions throughout this entire pandemic, but it's impossible to talk about them without getting into the general lockdowns. Italy scared the world. After the outbreak escaped Wuhan, Italy became the epicenter for a while. As of the end of June, Italy has had about 250,000 coronavirus cases. Many Italians tried to keep continuing with life as normal. For those who say that this behavior was unique to the US and we're a special kind of selfish for trying to continue our lives, you're wrong. In Italy, people were ticketed for going on general walks. At some point, one mayor even threatened to send in police with flamethrowers. People have suggested that that was a joke, but considering the situation, I don't think that that could have possibly been considered a joke. Cultural barrier or not, telling people public safety orders during a pandemic is a terrible place to have a joke. The rest of the world did not want to become the next Italy. It almost became a meme. If we don't do X, Y, or Z, in 2 weeks we will look like Italy. Here in the United States, though, New York was looking like it would be. On March 19th, California became the first state to lock down. Let's talk about some misconceptions of the lockdowns, because the plot has been lost entirely. The slogan for the lockdowns when they were first sold to us was "flatten the curve." You don't hear this much anymore because of something called the goal creep. You don't hear "flatten the curve" anymore because no one actually wants to flatten the curve anymore. Do you know what the purpose of the lockdowns were? Actually, let me rephrase that question. How many cases of COVID was locking down meant to prevent? If you answered anything other than 0, you are wrong. The lockdowns were never meant to prevent a single case of COVID. The purpose of lockdowns was not to prevent coronavirus cases, but to stop them from happening all at once. I know people have lost this goal because they're being surprised that cases are going up now that the lockdowns are ending. That was always supposed to happen. There's a reason that the states that didn't lock down aren't seeing the spikes that the states that are reopening are seeing. The idea was that our hospital infrastructure was going to be overwhelmed, and instead of dealing with all the cases at once, we would spread it over weeks. Not months. Weeks. Flattening the curve was supposed to be over the course of 15 days, and end roughly on April 1st. What an April Fool's Day prank that was. At the same time, experts did claim that we needed to lock down for several more weeks. Once again, though, weeks. not months. At some point, stopping everyone from getting the virus all at once became stopping people from getting the virus altogether. If you've lost count, we're between 4 and 5 months in. It's worth noting that every single lockdown order in the United States was an executive order issued by state governor, without any legislative oversight. To be fair, most other countries did have some kind of lockdown, with the notable exception of Sweden. Apparently, it's against Sweden's constitution. It's against the American Constitution as well to prevent freedom of assembly, but that's neither here nor there. We should be talking about the effectiveness of the lockdowns before we talk about the legal or ethical ramifications, right? I mean, the best time to do that would have been before we tried these policies, but the second best time is now, I suppose. Study after study shows that lockdowns didn't work for what they eventually became, preventing the virus entirely. Sweden's COVID death count has been approaching 0. They were heavily criticized for not locking down all throughout spring, but in a few years it may look like what everyone else did was simply delaying the inevitable. In the United States, several states such as Florida, Texas, and Arizona have been criticized for opening up too early. This ignores the 9 states that didn't lock down whatsoever, and didn't see explosive growth in the virus. Many states saw their peak before the lockdowns were enacted at all, or within the incubation period afterwards. And the lockdowns were doomed to fail from the start. Let's talk about the practicality of their measures. Starting with curfews, I suppose. Many states imposed curfews, saying that people couldn't be outside after a particular hour. The logic doesn't hold up. There is nothing saying that it's more likely to spread the virus at night than it is during the day. In fact, like many of the other methods, this could have a backlash effect. If you force people who would have been out at night into shorter and shorter hours, it crowds more traffic into less time, which increases the chance for infection. Only having certain stores open also has a similar effect. Imagine if there are 5 stores with 5 customers in each. Of those 25 people, only one of them has COVID. With 5 different stores, they end up infecting only the 5 people in the store that they go to. When you've crammed them all into one store, that creates 25 new cases, not 5. It can also get people to travel around more if they start looking for a store that is still open, or a store that is still allowed to sell the product that they are currently looking for. So let's talk about the costs of the lockdowns. Because of the media reporting, there's been a stereotype that anti-lockdown people just want haircuts, or they want to sacrifice grandma for the stock market. If you take me seriously as someone who doesn't fall into one of those strawman arguments, I will take you seriously as someone who wants genuine knowledge and information. Let's also keep in mind that it may take years before we truly find out the actual cost of our lockdown policies. Not just in economic terms, but in terms of human suffering and human deaths. Yes, human deaths. People have and will continue to die because of the lockdown policies. And I'm having trouble figuring out where to start. How about the medical establishments we were trying to save with the lockdowns? Let's start with elective surgery. Elective surgery is a terrible name, by the way. It conjures up visions of plastic surgery, like a nose job, but it actually includes things like stage 3 cancer surgeries. An elective surgery is simply any surgery that you don't need to have done right here and now, i.e., you elect to have it. In the UK alone, 35,000 cancer deaths may come about because of delayed diagnoses. And I want to have an aside about the media reporting right now. A lot of these media reports say coronavirus did it, like this one. This is not true. The coronavirus did not cause these missed cancer diagnoses. It was our human decision to lock down and prevent people from getting these diagnoses. We had the option not to do this. This is self-evident by the places in the world that did not lock down. Call it a desperate decision if you want, but this was our decision. Not the decision of the virus. None of these are side effects of the virus, but our decisions to lock down. And blaming the coronavirus for these is kind of like blaming the dog for farting when we all know that he didn't do it. Also in the UK, a backlog of surgeries threatens to overwhelm their hospital services. Isn't it ironic? In an attempt to stop hospitals from being overwhelmed, we created a system where people held off going to the doctors when they desperately should have. So months worth of cases will all come in at once. And that's just cancer, and one country. You want to add dentistry to that? An alarming number of people have attempted to do it themselves with wire cutters and super glue. Dentistry is definitely one of the things that should have never been closed, because it's going to become a huge problem in the coming months and years. Because if there's a type of treatment you do not want to delay, it's a trip to the dentist. Bad problems can easily become worse. A toothache untreated becomes a root canal. Root canals untreated can lead to an abscessed tooth that has to be removed. You know what doesn't help? In the United States, elective surgeries are a major part part of hospitals' business models. Because their main source of profit has vanished, many doctors are being laid off and furloughed. During a pandemic, because of our decisions, doctors are having benefits reduced and are even being retired or laid off. In the United States, 60,000 family practices have closed their doors. I need to keep reminding you this. Locking down was a practice that was meant to save hospitals and medical staff from being overwhelmed, and we've done so well that hospitals are being closed down. And we're not even done with the medical consequences of this. Vaccine programs have been interrupted in 68 countries because of the lockdowns. That's 80 million infants who are no longer vaccinated from measles or polio, as well as a bunch of other routine vaccines, like mumps and rubella. And the kicker is that we were pretty close to getting rid of polio altogether. In terms of mental health, calls to suicide hotlines have seen a 900% rise. I'm sorry, that's an exaggeration. The real number is 891%, or basically 900%. So, you know how when your friends or even a random stranger says that he's depressed due to the ongoing lockdown measures, and you just throw him a suicide hotline number? Yeah, you're not helping at all. Suicide hotlines have been too overwhelmed to do anything. Actual suicides are expected to rise in a similar fashion as well. It's a perfect storm to create mental health problems. First of all, there's a storm of stress and background anxiety due to the pandemic. Then you take them away from their jobs. Doing nothing like that is a way that depressive thoughts fester. Then you end up isolating these people away from any friends or family. Then you make them feel guilty for being a walking biohazard. Don't let them go outside, and make sure you end in-person therapy. It's too risky. If there is no major spike in suicide from the human organized lockdowns, it will literally redefine what we know about depression. It's also worth noting that gun sales have been on the rise, especially among first-time buyers. If you're feeling depressed, I'd give you plenty of advice on what to do to help take care of it, but it involves civil disobedience and breaking social distancing guidelines, and that could get this video taken down from YouTube. Childhood development is something else that's going to be of consequence. Children just can't put it off for months at a time. We may have a generation of socially stunted youth, crippled by anxiety disorders. Children who have trouble making connections with other people often turn to violence or drugs later in life. And that's not even mentioning education. Throughout the world, education programs have been interrupted, and it's actually a great deal of controversy right now determining whether they should start up again in the fall. People argue that Zoom-style education is perfectly acceptable. Distance learning has repeatedly shown throughout the entire crisis that it is a failure of an idea. In some school environments, 4 in 10 students have showed up for class 2 or less days per week. Missing out on education is well documented to hurt people drastically later in life. In the realm of mental health, let's go over some things that we used to know. Some people are forced to live and stay by themselves during the lockdown, completely alone. In places like New York, some apartments are about the size of prison cells. Solitary confinement has been deemed torture. Loneliness is about as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And if you're stressed about the world, that does even more to your mortality. Human beings are a social species. Preventing people from seeing each other is not just inhumane, it is literally inhuman. You see, maybe you've heard of this thing called oxytocin. It's a hormone in our brain that makes us feel good when we are physically close to each other. Not talking through a screen, that doesn't do jack shit for it, but in the same physical space. It's not to be confused with oxycodone. Oxycodone is a painkiller that is often abused by people who try to get high, and it's been an epidemic of its own for several years now. I bring this up because in times of intense stress, when people have nothing better to do, they often turn to addictions. And because alcohol is apparently an essential product, use of it is predictably on the rise. Both not having a job and being addicted to something are both direct causal links to abuse, both spousal and child. And wouldn't you know, like suicide calls being on the rise, domestic abuse calls have also been on the rise. The best thing that you could possibly argue for the lockdowns is that we are sacrificing some lives for the lives of others. And in that case, we as a society have failed the basic concept of triage. Let me ask you this. Between an 80-year-old man and a 17-year-old boy, which one do you think gets priority when it comes to a replacement heart? Believe it or not, there are people whose job it is to make decisions like this, and it is a very difficult job that I wouldn't envy ever. The victims of COVID-19 are primarily elderly, with the highest risk of death being those above 70. When you put things mathematically, a 17-year-old who misses a cancer diagnosis and dies weighs differently than a 70-year-old man who gets COVID and dies. It sounds horrible, which is why triage is done by professionals who are able to learn to put their emotions aside when making public health decisions. You hear, if we can just save one life, and a lot of other slogans as if our decisions aren't going to lead to any disaster or death on their own. These lockdowns will and have been leading to death of their own and other forms of human misery. This GIF was extremely popular in the coronavirus subreddit. I doubt it would be as appealing if it was, this person blew his brains out, this person died of a missed cancer diagnosis, this person was killed by her husband. Because what you have asked for with these lockdowns entails exactly that. It might not have if this lasted for 15 days as promised, but in months, yes, these are the real tangible effects of our lockdown experiment. And I'm not done either. This is only if you care about your own country. According to the UN, over 135 million people across the world are going to face famines because of our actions. 300,000 people could starve to death per day over a 3-month period. People have often asked me if I wanted to die drowning in my own fluids when I take issue with lockdown measures or other measures used to curb the spread of coronavirus. I would prefer that vastly to starving to death. Generally speaking, from diagnosis to death in COVID takes about 14 days. It takes your average adult twice as long to starve to death while your body eats itself. It's a painful and horrible way to go. In the United States, food banks are stressed and overwhelmed. Several million children have relied on school lunches in the United States to be able to eat, which they no longer have access to. This isn't a problem that you can get out by printing more money. The issue isn't that people can't afford this free food, the issue is that people aren't working to produce it. Yeah, we have a surplus of food, and we're nearing the end of it. And of course, in the next couple of months, 28 million people will become homeless. Sure, you can delay the rent again, but as soon as that timer wears off, the landlords will be asking for their back rent that was missed, because they need to pay taxes on the property. If they can't pay the taxes on the property, the cities that have required rent freezes will be in even worse shape. And a lot of people aren't prepared to pay back rent, because CARES is going to expire at the end of July, and people who are on unemployment right now will be $600 short per week. You see, when people talk about the economy, they mean they don't want 28 million people to be homeless. It's a really simple solution to prevent this problem, though. Let people work. This is all that had to be done at literally any point in time. I am beyond confident that the lockdowns of 2020 will go down in history as possibly the worst public health policy of all time. Because not only did it fail to do what it was supposed to do, it literally did the opposite, and it threw in a bunch of collateral damage to compensate. I mean this with no exaggeration. If we did literally nothing in regards to the lockdown, we would have been better off. Every single bullet point seems to show that. And I'm not even done with the consequences yet. Let's talk about the authoritarianism that's been screaming around the world. In Kenya, more people have died from police brutality trying to crack down on people disobeying the lockdown than have actually died from COVID in that country. In their desperation to stop COVID, Hungary became a dictatorship. A mayor in Brazil warns of genocide, with COVID killing off a specific minority at a disproportionate amount, combined with a far-right government. In Melbourne, Australia, they harshly locked down their public housing towers in Victoria, not letting people outside. These were small apartments with no balconies, and the government took care of them like governments do, giving them food that expired in 2019 and giving Muslim families pork products that they couldn't eat. Contact tracing is another lockdown measure that has backfired horribly in some cases. In South Korea, for instance, a contact tracer traced an outbreak to a gay bar, and then increased incidents of homophobia across the country, sometimes outing gay people to their conservative and homophobic families. In the United States, the mayor of New York City has been accused of anti-Semitic double standards after singling out the Jewish community in a tweet, breaking up a Jewish funeral, and locking off a park in a Jewish area. He did this while supporting Black Lives Matter protests, which totaled in greater numbers.
My daughter Kiara was arrested at a protest. She believes a lot of change is needed. I'm proud of her that she cares so much and she was willing to go out there and do something about it. I admire that she was out there trying to change something that she thought was unjust and doing it in a peaceful manner.
Governor Gretchen Whitmer threatened people with harsher lockdowns for protesting her lockdown orders, and then went out herself to protest in the Black Lives Matter movement. In the United States, we've had several snitching hotlines turning neighbor on neighbor. The mayor of Los Angeles even himself infamously said, "Snitches get rewards." When the citizenry is encouraged to tattle on each other, it always leads to bad things. Well, maybe with some exceptions. When it was tried in New York City, it was filled with trolls and porn to the point that it had to be shut down. And when this was tried in Missouri, all the snitches got their personal information released because they needed to make it public to snitch in the first place. This information revealed exactly why this is a bad idea. A lot of the time, people snitched on bosses and workspaces they didn't like, or neighbors that they had a vendetta against to begin with. I can't speak to the rest of the world, but the lockdown orders are above and beyond unconstitutional here in the United States. You don't have to be a political scholar to see this. The First Amendment clearly states that the freedom to peaceably assemble shall not be infringed. There is no disclaimer that says, unless there's a pandemic, shall not be infringed. Ever. No limits. As long as it's peaceable, you can assemble. Several of our politicians, Whitmer namely, have clearly been on a power trip, and this is hard to argue against. And no, it's not like the Founding Fathers had never foresaw a potential pandemic. It's not like they're a new thing of the 20th and 21st century. The Founding Fathers knew the pandemics could cause devastation even back then. In fact, George Washington even led the first mass military inoculation against smallpox. People like to point out the court decision Jacobson versus Massachusetts, in which our Supreme Court did affirm the ability of the state to suspend rights in the name of public health. This decision was used to uphold a later court case, Buck versus Bell, which determined that mentally handicapped people could be forcibly sterilized against their will, which happened up until the 1970s. It has also never been expressly overturned. During this pandemic, Jacobson versus Massachusetts has been used to justify Texas suspending abortion rights. It's a stupid decision that could have even been used to justify the Tuskegee syphilis experiment and injecting pregnant women with plutonium. You can justify anything in the name of public health. One attorney even argued that the protocol for Ebola should be immediate execution. That guy later killed his mother's dog and claimed that he was the second coming of Christ. Yes, he was an actual attorney that actually had a part of high-profile cases and shit. This isn't old news either. This guy was arrested in 2018 and had a history of posting racist and misogynistic shit to Twitter before the platform banned him. Jacobson versus Massachusetts also led to the creation of the modern anti-vaccine movement, by the way. It's a terrible decision. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. When you tell people that they have to do something, it will make some people more apt to not listen to you. I guess that's a good lean into masks. In the past few weeks, many places in the United States have put mask ordinances as lockdowns ease. And a lot of people are not happy about it, protesting in all kinds of ways. And a lot of people are wondering why the hell people don't want to wear a mask. I mean, some people are even going around saying that they're not even effective. Where did they get that idea? From the United States Surgeon General, the highest health officer in the entire country. On February 29th, he tweeted out that we need to stop buying masks. The tweet that is still in existence, by the way. The person we put in charge of pandemic control, Dr. Fauci, also said that we shouldn't wear masks.
The masks are important for someone who's infected to prevent them from infecting someone else. Now, when you see people and look at the films in China and South Korea, whatever, everybody's wearing a mask. Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet. But it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. And often there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching their face.
And can you get some schmutz sort of staying inside there?
Of course. But when you think masks, you should think of healthcare providers needing them and people who are ill.
The Center of Disease Control said not to. If you want to wonder why there's a low mask compliance, it's your own damn fault. They actually gave reasons about the effectiveness of masks, or the lack thereof. In a 60 Minutes interview, Fauci himself states that masks could make things worse. If people fiddled with them, it could make them touch their face, which would directly lead to contamination. And this isn't just an American thing either.
Healthy West Australians are being warned against using face masks to protect themselves against coronavirus. A safety video is going viral, showing how ineffective some can be as the nation struggles with a surgical mask shortage.
It's the safety video going viral. An Argentinian firefighter with a deodorant can, simulating a sneeze or cough. It's feared coronavirus could travel in the air, like deodorant does in aerosols. This demonstration showing most face masks are useless at trapping or blocking moisture, unless they're the N95 grade.
There are actually several videos that show the risks of masks. So, before we continue, let me be absolutely clear here. Our understanding of a mask has not changed whatsoever. We didn't suddenly learn that what Fauci said here wasn't true. While our understanding of the virus has changed, the actual understanding of the masks has not. And saying that our knowledge of the pandemic has changed over time is not a defense for what Fauci or the Surgeon General had said about masks themselves. With that in note, we have a severe problem. Either every single part of our health apparatus apparatus here in the United States was lying then, or they're lying now. This is a dangerously bad situation for even the possibility of this happening. The CDC did admit that they lied, as they wanted to save masks for the professionals. The Surgeon General also suggested the same. But Fauci himself, our disease expert, gave reasons as to why the masks don't work. If these people were willing to lie, for whatever the purpose, it means they're willing to lie again. Liars don't just lie once and then not again. If they can justify it for the public health, they will lie all night and day. And the fact that there's a reasonable doubt about this is a major problem. Fauci even admitted that he lied when he was questioned at a hearing.
So Dr. Fauci, you said as late, and I got a newspaper article that as late as March 31st, there was no consensus on wearing masks. And the president, as you know, relies on your expertise. Do you now regret not advising people more forcefully to wear masks earlier?
Okay, we're going to play that game. Let me explain to you what happened back then.
Should be a yes or a no.
No, there's more than a yes or no by the tone of your question. I don't regret that, because let me explain to you what happened. At that time, there was a paucity of equipment that our healthcare providers needed, who put themselves daily in harm's way of taking care of people who are ill. We did not want to divert masks and PPE away from them to be used by the people.
Okay,
now that we have enough, we recommend.
This video is more than a little worrying due to Fauci's response and for McKinley's lack of ability to ask actual follow-up questions. So we're going to play that game again, Dr. Fauci says. What game? Is holding him responsible for his medical advice, holding him to his word, considered a game in his mind? If he wanted to protect PPE for medical staff, why didn't he tell people to make cloth masks, like the CDC suggests now, as better than nothing? Why should the American people trust anything else that he has to say, now that he is a known and admitted liar, who will lie as long as he can justify it for the greater good? Is he aware that because of his lies, there's a massive confusion within the United States about mask effectiveness? How many lives do you think could have been saved if people wore masks from the start of the pandemic? Fauci should take responsibility for lives that were lost from people who decided that masks were ineffective, based on his own words. Quite honestly, it's not so much that Fauci lied, but the fact that he was able to do so repeatedly, readily, and without dropping a beat. This is scary with how confident he was able to lie in those videos and interviews. Whether masks work or not, Fauci lied, either then or now. Currently, the CDC and the WHO say that masks are better than nothing. But let's really examine this. Do you, dear viewer, wear your mask properly? Let's run down the checklist. Are you clean-shaven? Mask effectiveness is greatly reduced when facial hair breaks the seal. Any longer facial hair, like a beard or such, will create gaps that a virus can easily escape from. And remember, you cannot mandate that the general public be clean-shaven, as that violates the First Amendment. Not only is fashion a manner of speech, and your type of facial hair is a type of fashion, but some religions require people to not ever shave, such as the Sikh. Second question, and this is one of the bigger mistakes, does your mask cover your nose? If you don't cover your nose with it, you have no right to criticize anyone else for not wearing masks, since you're basically at the same level. Third, have you ever shared a mask with anyone at all? Sharing a mask is like sharing someone's underwear. If someone has coronavirus and you wear their mask, congratulations, you got infected from wearing their mask. Next, have you ever used a disposable mask twice? Great, that's like using a disposable diaper or a condom twice. And of course, if you take your mask off to talk to someone, you have ruined the whole point. You see, that whole 6-foot distance tip, that's for when you're just around each other. When you're talking, the distance is much further than 6 feet. Talking releases droplets further than breathing. So yes, you are expected to communicate with people from at least 6 feet away with a muffler over your mouth. Next, have you ever touched the inside of your mask without washing your hands? You can't do that. Your mask has now been contaminated. Do you wash your hands before putting on your mask and after taking it off? And do you remove the mask from the ear straps and not the mouth area? It's quite hard for people to do all these things. But if you do each of these things, congratulations, you've done everything right and you might still not be helping. Lots of people buy masks from Etsy or Amazon that are basically mesh and provide no real or even theoretical protection. If there are holes big enough in your mask to see through, the virus will get through. Studies on mask use assume that people use them perfectly, but as you've often seen, people don't, because the protocol to use them properly is complicated, especially to do every time somebody leaves the house. So let's go over some common misconceptions with mask use. One of the most common things people will say is, all of these people are going to get COVID, but I'm going to be fine. I'm wearing a mask. Nope. The mask, even assuming that it works, is not to protect you. It's to protect other people from you. This is what it's supposed to do in theory. COVID or any other virus can get in through other orifices, like your tear ducts. Or, of course, if you follow mask protocol wrong and end up smearing the disease on your face. Rule 1 of not catching COVID, assuming that we haven't been lied to again, is not to touch your face. And by putting masks on and taking them off constantly, it requires you to touch your face repeatedly. There is reasonable doubt to the effectiveness of masks. People have suggested that you can make a mask out of anything, including scarves or t-shirts with holes. There is a reasonable doubt to these things working. And this is the problem with security theater. If these things don't keep people safe and just make people feel safe, they are more likely to engage in risky behavior, violating social distancing protocols because they feel that their mask is perfect protection. It's not just in the United States either. Canada started mandating masks in July, far past their peak for COVID. If these were the silver bullets that they were praised as, why did it take so long for the Western world to start mandating them at all? In fact, in many places of the world, masks have been illegal, most notably in Hong Kong, where they were banned last year in reaction to the protests. That ban lasted until April 9th of this year, which was ruled unconstitutional. As you can see, Hong Kong was already on a decline before masks were unbanned, and months later, they're on a rise again in spite of them. There is empirical evidence against the effects of masks from all over the world. Even if you ignore China, where the outbreak started and masks were mandated very early on. Some Asian countries like South Korea are so fed up with the masks because of it now being summer and very, very hot. And yes, it's hot and humid, and masks do make it more difficult for people to breathe. All I'm saying is that if masks were said to be effective back in winter, there would be much higher compliance than there is now. On an extremely humid day, your average person is not going to want to do anything that makes it harder for them to breathe. And even if they do, they'll sweat more. Sweat is a droplet. COVID is a droplet-based virus. This is why gyms are still closed. This is ignoring all of the other legitimate health concerns that masks may occur. There are physical ailments that do prevent people from wearing masks. Most notably, conditions that make breathing difficult on their own, such as asthma or COPD. But it also involves people who have limited movement capabilities, like those with cerebral palsy, those with tactile sensitivity that can lead to sensory overload, as in people with autism, or people who have had psychological trauma. Masks can cause some people to engage in panic attacks. Because of these things, by the way, masks cannot be made mandatory in the United States in any meaningful way. Requiring someone to wear a mask violates the Americans with Disabilities Act. And no, people with a disability do not actually have to prove that they have a condition. Unless, of course, you want to go to court each and every single time that somebody claims that they have a disability. A place of business actually puts themselves at risk of a lawsuit for requiring masks for everyone. That's even ignoring the theorized risks of masks, and I'm not really interested in getting into, but they involve both physical and psychological. There's plenty of reasons to doubt the efficacy of masks that don't rely on theory. For now, studies seem to imply that masks do work in ideal conditions. But one of the leading arguments against masks is that the conditions that people wear them in is far from ideal, and that a badly treated and contaminated mask is far worse than no mask at all. Of course, you do get a bunch of defenses for masks. If there's a potential that they could work to save lives, we should wear them. Right. There was also potential that ventilators could save lives, and those ended up killing people. And we spent the first leg of the race trying to mass produce something that we can't really use now. Anything we do poorly thought out can do more damage than it even has the potential of preventing. A lot of people like to bring up the Spanish flu, talking about how they knew to lock down and they knew to use masks way back when. And yeah, you could see a lot of people wearing masks and such way back in various pictures. Using this is a terrible argument. The Spanish flu was the deadliest pandemic in recent history. 50 million people died from across the world. And here in the United States, over 5 times as many people died from it than they had as COVID. From a cursory glance, it looks like whatever they did back then was a massive failure. Hell, even back then, actual experts were doubting their effectiveness, because people often made them out of whatever whatever they had lying around and didn't wash the damn things. But there's a chance the disease can spread asymptomatically. You know, asymptomatic spread of disease isn't a new thing, right? And it isn't going away after COVID either. There are a few diseases that can do this, most infamously, typhoid. But there's also tuberculosis, which killed 1.5 million in 2018. And then there's HIV/AIDS, which can also spread asymptomatically. To follow that logic through to its end, you will need to wear a mask until asymptomatic spread is simply not a thing, because you could have a whole host of illnesses and never even notice it. And even mundane things like the flu or common colds can kill people. Anything to save a life can go to scary places if you take it to its logical extreme. If you set a super spreader on fire, that may eventually save a lot of lives. It's inhumane as hell, but anything to save a life is a moral standard that requires you to do something like that if someone is spreading a disease that you cannot cure. It's all too easy to be led astray by those kinds of feelings. And if you want to defend masks or lockdowns or social tracing or any other social policy, you need to stop thinking of these things in a vacuum, because they aren't in a vacuum. Everything builds into each other, and everything we are doing to fight COVID seems to be sticking around for longer than is necessary, or even wanted. Sometimes. Do you want to know why our culture has seemed more than a little schizophrenic when it comes to its decisions? You can blame the media for that. Remember when the media said that COVID was just the flu and you were racist for being concerned about it? Great, the media doesn't remember that either. Some point after the Chinese New Year, the media went in the exact opposite direction, and they went that direction hard. And why this happened was stupid. I'm sorry, it's just the most stupid partisan shit that I've ever come across. You want to hear a story? In January, all the news reports were downplaying the coronavirus. All of them. The flu was more deadly. Here's just one of them. You can find many, many more if you use Google's archives. You want to know what happened? I'll tell you exactly what happened that caused their change in tune. Listening to the news and hearing that they were all downplaying this thing, the president, Donald Trump, said that we have this thing under control. Look, I am not the biggest fan of the president, but the news relationship with him has been frustrating as hell. Here's an article about he and the other presidents eat his steaks, because it's so important that the American people know that he eats his steaks with ketchup. So Trump issued his travel ban and declared the country under quarantine in January. Media tore him to bits for it. It was racist and ineffective. And if you want to really know my feelings about this whole thing, this makes me less angry at him for his actions. There's a concept in politics known as political capital. Political capital, more or less, is what any politician can feasibly do, based on their reputation or favors that they've accumulated. Unpopular things that politicians do cost more political capital, and extremely popular politicians are able to do things without expending much at all. In my opinion, the extreme backlash to the first measures that Donald Trump made it seem like he had spent as much of his political capital as he possibly could have. If he had done anything else at this point, he would have been dragged and berated. I honestly find the claim that he should have done way more back in January or even February a little bit short-sighted and stupid. I'm not saying what he did was effective. Not at all. I'm saying that anything more he would have done would have unilaterally been seen as unpopular by the wider public. Not only that, but in January he was going through an impeachment trial. Anything that he did would have made that situation even worse. His hands were further tied. What did people want to tackle this crisis? Oh, well, eventually they wanted more travel restrictions, which back in January and February were racist. Eventually they wanted us to all lock down. They wanted people to be prevented from going to their own jobs. How do you think it would look for a president who is being accused of various types of corruption to begin an authoritarian clampdown during an impeachment trial? By April, everyone criticized the guy for not doing anything. You find articles from April and May about how he should have done more things. He had early warnings. Earlier action could have saved lives. Yeah, sure. And one of the main criticisms of the lockdowns is a rise of authoritarianism. And do you know one of the bigger fears of the Trump presidency? That he'd pull a Hungary and turn himself into a dictator. And the media has been like this since the beginning. Remember when Trump called the coronavirus a hoax? In February, after he had already banned travel from China and put the country on quarantine and brought on Dr. Fauci. For the record, he did not call the disease itself a hoax. He called the politicization of the virus a hoax, which is still a poor choice of words because it doesn't seem to be a hoax at all, but actual observable reality. Petty politics is one thing, but the attitude of the news media has probably gotten people killed. No, this is no exaggeration. And I'm not talking about the panic that people have been frenzied into. Let's talk about hydroxychloroquine. In March, Trump argued that the drug, an anti-malarial, which had been used to treat lupus in the past, had hope in treatment of COVID. And of course, the media was quick to tear him a new one. First of all, a woman killed her husband with fish tank cleaner, not hydroxychloroquine. She claimed that it sounded similar to that of the drug that was touted, and she fed it to herself and her husband. She blamed Trump for this, and the media ran away with it. She is now under investigation for murdering her husband with the fish tank cleaner, because nothing about her story added up. For starters, she was a registered Democrat, not a Trump supporter. I cannot stress this enough, but if you have a medical concern or a question, please ask your doctor and trust them above anyone else. Anyone else. Do not try to cure yourself with a drug that you hear the media touting, or the president, or anyone but your doctor. People even claim that Trump had a financial stake in the sales of hydroxychloroquine. Snopes rated this as mostly false, mostly because he sought to gain like $100. He had independent trusts that he didn't really control that have partially invested in the drug. The amount that he could have gotten was way beyond negligible for a man who was a billionaire. The drug itself immediately became political. Let me repeat that. A medication became a political football, and what people thought about it in some cases depended on their political opinion. And yeah, there were studies about this. One study was so significant it got the WHO to stop trials on the drug. This study was later retracted. The people behind the study didn't respond to independent requests for audit. Outside experts raised concern over it. It was largely propped up for political reasons, and it got the WHO to stop trials on it. Does hydroxychloroquine work? Does it not? I don't know, and this is a problem. I can't know because there's so much competing information. This isn't just scientific disagreement either. It's political disagreement. Some studies show it's effective, some studies show that it kills people. There's a major problem here. You want to know a fun trick? Log into Google and look for search results before the year 2020, and look for news reports under Too Clean. You will see countless, and I mean countless studies and articles and web pages that say that we are too clean as a society, that we kill beneficial bacteria and destroy the horny layer of our skin by washing too much, that being too clean will cause increased allergies in children and autoimmune disorders in the rest of us. Is this true? I don't fucking know. I really don't. Did we all just decide that all of these peer-reviewed studies that were repeatedly reported on are just not true anymore? Yeah, science changes over time, but not this quickly. The fact that this was such a common idea before 2020 was a problem. Either that or abandoning the idea completely is a problem. One of the most frustrating things of this whole pandemic is how society as a whole seems to have a memory of the goldfish. Maybe memory loss is a symptom of COVID. Remember back when protests were seen as white nationalists back in April? You know, until the protests became about Black Lives Matter. According to the news, Black Lives Matter protests actually led to a slowdown of COVID. We went from protesting is putting hospitals in jeopardy to over 1,000 doctors signing an open letter saying that protesting some things were important. Protests that were bigger, closer knit, and went on for longer than the lockdown protests, by the way. In some places, the George Floyd protests are still going on. Let me tell you, that letter that the doctor signed shot the credibility of our health establishment even more. It showed that our medical establishment was willing to put politics in front of medicine and science. Not to mention that they have all engaged in an act of racism for doing this. COVID, as long been known, disproportionately affects black people more than white people. What these doctors have done was condemn the white people from going out and protesting, and instead encouraged a more vulnerable group to go out and protest during the pandemic. Yes, it wasn't only people of color protesting, but the protests did occur mainly in areas with higher concentrations of minority populations. By putting politics in front of medicine and science, these people condemned vulnerable people explicitly by their own words to an uneven risk for a pandemic disease. Remember how the news said that Donald Trump was stupid for saying that the sunlight could do a number on COVID? And then we found out that sunlight could do a number on COVID? Yeah, it's a really good thing that we told everyone to stay inside and out of the sunlight. It's also a good thing that we closed all of the gyms because obesity is another main risk factor for COVID, and one of the reasons that the US was hit so hard. And the news is still doing this shit. It started with worrying about COVID is racist. Then it was COVID is going to kill us all. Then it was the lockdowns are necessary and protesting is evil. Then it was protesting is highly important and no, it isn't causing an increase in cases. And now we're back to a mysterious second wave of the illness that has come out of nowhere. COVID cases have been spiking in many states around the US. Here's the rub though, and here's what they're not telling you. The death rates of COVID continue to fall. No one is actually sure why though. There are some guesses. One of the things pointed out is increased testing. In some locations of the United States, you can get a test on demand basically. Another theory is that it's now infecting young people rather than old people. The news reports this as the big scary thing, but it's actually good news. A young person's immune system is far more robust at fighting off an illness than an older person. This is one of the reasons that the elderly's death rate from this has been so high. While people under the age of 18 have died, they've died far less than even from the flu. If this thing only affects, or primarily affects younger people like the flu does, we're on the road to getting better. This is how evolution works, by the way. A virus does not actually want to kill its host. That would be like you burning down your own house. A virus would rather have you alive. So, over time, it gets less deadly. Another theory, of course, is that all the people who are going to die of COVID already had. Look at this chart here. This is the CDC's chart for excess mortality. Anything above the line with a plus marked on it shows that more people died in that month than were expected to. The leftmost bump was the particularly bad influenza season of 2018. I want you to take a look at the far right, though. These aren't bars in progress. They're already finished recording, and June had the lowest excess mortality altogether, far below expected projections, while the lockdown measures themselves have been expiring or ending. It's fair to speculate that the absence of June deaths may have been because of the earlier excess deaths. In short, some of the people that COVID killed back in winter and spring would have brought June's excess mortality to relative normal. Another issue, though, is that people have been recording deaths funny. The most notable issue is that in some states, 11 of them, have been mixing antibody and viral cases. If you've had COVID and have recovered from it, and you get an antibody test, you are counted as a positive case. Colorado, Delaware, Georgia, Maine, Mississippi, Missouri, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Vermont, Virginia, and most notably, Texas have all been doing this. I point to Texas because right now, these higher case totals, quote-unquote, have caused them to freak out about a second wave. Some states, such as Arizona, do not report recovery numbers. Most damningly, however, is the CDC has asked states to start including probable cases in their findings. When the two of these are merged together, like they happen in New Jersey, it can make things look far worse than they are. In New York City, 3,700 people were counted that had never tested positive for COVID because they were all probable cases. Do you want to know how bad the testing situation can get? The country of Tanzania sent the WHO a goat, a quail, and a papaya sample to test for COVID. All of them came back positive, and you wonder why the US is pulling out of this organization. The news has been desperate to scare people. Kawasaki disease is something they ran with for a while. Of 21 cases in Canada, only 4 of them had COVID antibodies. Also, I want you to take a careful look at that headline. It almost disagrees with the content of the actual article. Also, according to actual people who look into Kawasaki disease, we've been seeing less diagnoses of it this year, not more. The extent of the media's lies is disgusting. CBS used footage from Italy and insinuated that it was from New York City. Chris Cuomo, a news reporter, talked up his symptoms of the disease and made it sound absolutely horrible. In the end, he broke quarantine like so many others, including one Neil Ferguson, who basically came up with the models that put the entire world into lockdown. A news reporter scolded people for not wearing masks, and a bystander came about to reveal that his cameraman wasn't wearing a mask either. There are story upon story of our medical and our political betters breaking their own quarantine rules. And where does that leave the rest of us? Fractured economies, countries, and lives for methods that have done little to nothing or have had massively backfired. At this point, our first priority should be learning from our mistakes. To recap, we panicked. A lot. We did a lot of stupid shit in our panic. Some of us hoarded toilet paper. Other of us did a lot worse, snitching on our neighbors. Someone even burned down a church that wasn't following social distancing protocols. Yeah, that'll stop the spread of COVID, unleashing a fire that can burn down a whole fucking town. Throughout 2020, I've been increasingly depressed, which is why I've been so light on content this year. It wasn't from the virus and the worry that that created, but it was from how everyone in our societies reacted to it. How everyone was ready to tear each other out at the throat throughout it all, and being so high and mighty about their moral superiority while doing it. The blind belief in the news after they changed their story back and forth was a special kind of infuriating. Every single time it was, they've got to stop believing this shit now. Okay, now. What about now? Please now. No, never. As the news literally contradicted themselves time and time again. This year came up with the term mostly peaceful riots because of the news programs. You have no right to get angry or uppity about anyone not wearing masks after our health establishment, all of it, discouraged mask use back during the start of this pandemic. And I do support people not wearing them until every single person in our health establishment who suggested that they didn't work or told people to stop buying them resign. The only sympathy that's being thrown around to the people who've had their lives sacrificed is a phone number for an overwhelmed suicide hotline. That is something I think I can be justified in being angry at. All of this from methods and policies that gain more and more evidence that they do not work, while some people cling to old models claiming they're following the science. I am so tired and sick of this goal creep. From 15 days of flattening the curve to eradicating the virus, something which is not possible to do. It's very possible that COVID-19 is so widespread that it may turn from pandemic to endemic. But it's not as worrying as it sounds, because repeatedly we're seeing that the death rate of it is falling. The number of deaths of COVID have been declining for 10 straight weeks, as we bungle out of lockdowns and into mask policies, which means that COVID is actually on its way to losing its epidemic status in the United States. You have to take all of this into consideration if you still want to follow the science. Clinging to these old models and these old programs and these old protocols is not science, it's faith. Blind faith. I didn't even mention literally everything throughout this whole thing, but as you can see, I've been going on for more than an hour now. But the more and more that I look into it, and as you can see, I've looked into it a great deal. In the description, there's about 140 some odd sources. I've been collecting research for months now. The more that I look into all of this stuff, the bigger a mistake that all of this was. Not the virus, our human reactions in response to it. In many cases, if we did literally nothing, we would have been better off. One data point we're still looking for is the excess mortality of the entire year. If places that didn't lock down like Sweden or some of the US states have even equivalent excess mortalities than the rest of the world that did lock down, it will be the final nail in the coffin. But even without that, there is very little that can justify any of the measures that we took to fight this invisible enemy. If people ever ask you how the world ended, all you have to tell them is that we did everything we could to stop it, and that's what ended the world.